Alright, draft vote. Cal Toomey has just dropped his most recent power rankings for October, exactly a month after the September one, so it's very consistent, the release drops. And again, as Cal always does put out there, this is a power ranking, not a mock draft. Although having said that, I do think once we start getting to this time of year, the power rankings, I think, start to become a bit more of an accurate reflection of what the mock drafts will look like, because not a lot's going to change. Like, there's no more games to be played. There's not many interviews of note to be had unless it's the clubs going around to players' houses that don't really get documented, I guess. So there's not a hell of a lot that will change between now and draft, I wouldn't have thought, bar if you go back and watch a heap more footage to formulate a different opinion, which definitely can happen. Not saying that's not out of the equation, but Cal Toomey, obviously one of the best in the business at doing this, and everyone is always looking out keenly for his thoughts and views. So we thought we'd bring up his power rankings for October, and I've included in there just a bit of an arrow up or down if players have adjusted their rankings from his one in September. So I'll bring that up now, and then we will have a chat about it. So this is the power rankings that came out yesterday on the 23rd of October. As well, just quickly, the blue dots next to players' names, that indicates that they did not participate in the combine. So I just wanted to sort of flag those players, because I guess the lack of combine results can play a part in power rankings and mock drafts and things like that. But there's a couple of obviously big names in there that weren't able to participate due to illness or injury or surgery post-season. So hopefully, clubs already know enough about those players and can make some informed decisions. Looking at the top of the list, not much change for those first 9 picks really. So Dersma still at 1, Hewland at 2, Duff Tytler at 3, Dylan Patterson 4, Annabelle at 5, Roby still at 6, Xavier Taylor 7, Harry Dean 8, and Dyson Sharp 9. So they have all remained the same for Cal Toomey from September through till October. I guess, to my point at the start of the video, that these power rankings at this time of year can start to replicate a bit more of what a mock draft might look like. So if we consider that as a hypothetical for just very, very briefly, in the open draft anyway, so if we assume that Dersma in this scenario would be 1 to West Coast, Hewland doesn't count, and then Duff Tytler would be 2 to West Coast, that would then have in the open draft for picks 3 and 4, would be Sullivan Roby to Richmond and Xavier Taylor to Richmond, based on if this was to play out. It's interesting. I think a lot of people would walk away relatively happy with that from a Richmond perspective. I think a lot of people from West Coast would walk away relatively happy with that. I have seen some question marks that West Coast supporters have had over the drafting of CDT in recent times. And they've maybe expressed a bit more interest in Roby, but I'm not sure if that's from supporter level, from club level, maybe a combination of both. And I guess I've seen a few Richmond supporters unsure about whether the need is warranted for an Xavier Taylor type with being a defender, intercepting defender, or if we should be going to midfielders. I can definitely see the arguments for both. I guess from a defensive perspective, maybe the club's looking at future-proofing once Vlastuin retires, Broad retires, Short's at the latter part of his career. And then you need to kind of find some more quality players in that part of the ground, which Xavier Taylor would definitely fit the mould of. But I do also acknowledge and accept that we are a bit light on for midfield depth as well. Maybe Xavier Taylor could roll through the wing in midfield, which I think he might have done in some junior games. So, yeah, maybe there's an option there. But I guess to the point of a lot of other people's thinking is, do we need greater another midfielder like a Sharp, a Cumming, a Grill, and so on and so forth? But it's interesting. I guess the other... I'll go through the next 4 and then I'll go through another hypothetical. So in at number 10 this time around in October for Cal Toomey is Sam Cumming from Adelaide. He's jumped up. I'm pretty sure he was actually the biggest jumper out of all this list. He's climbed the most positions. And he did do testing, did test well, and he's definitely one I think will be on a lot of clubs' radars just because of his dual position side of things. Got good speed, and I think he's just a well-rounded player. So I wouldn't mind him. Aidan Schubert, he dropped down a spot in at number 11. Sam Grill up to number 12. And Sam Grill's the other one that's obviously been strongly linked to Richmond. I haven't actually really heard his name linked to any other club. Maybe other supporters from other clubs out there can correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, I'm not obviously across all other clubs' needs and wants and who they've been linked to, but nothing has seemed to have popped out in mainstream media linking Grill to anybody else bar us, from the best that I could see. So this is where I guess the next hypothetical becomes a little bit interesting. It does revolve around pick swapping, which I know, or sliding down picks, which I know everybody loves and hates to discuss all at the same time. But is there, I mean, okay, I guess there's a couple of scenarios and ways it can play out. If we were to not take Sullivan Roby at pick 3 for whatever silly reason that might be, if he was still there, or before we make the selection to take him, I would suspect that Melbourne are going to come hard for him. They were the ones that were probably onto him the earliest, and it sounds like they've had really strong interest in him. I don't know what the deal could look like with picks on the back end, but if we were to swap pick 3 for pick 7 and 8, granted that would allow the D's access to Sullivan Roby, which is probably something we maybe don't want to do anyway. Maybe we want to keep him to ourselves, which is completely fine. But it could then give us pick 4, 7, and 8 in the open draft, which you could still get a Dyson Sharp or a Xavier Taylor at pick 4, but then you could maybe get Grill and Cumming with the 2 Melbourne picks, so be able to group a couple of those guys together. A Jacob Farrow even could be an option as well. A Lockie Dobson could maybe come into play if we felt we needed to address that part of the ground. Look, I know I've said earlier that I've always felt like if any deal was to come our way that it would need to have a future pick involved, and I still do think we would like that, but I'm starting to just, I suppose, hypothesize and throw it out there. Is the prospect of having 2 back-to-back picks at 7 and 8 in an even field going to be more valuable for us, giving up that pick 3 spot? Again, it just comes down to who we as a club think we want and fits our needs the most. And look, I guess from a supporter perspective, there'll be a lot of people saying, nope, just take Roby. And I agree, and I think that's okay. But if you can get 3 players in an even draft in spots that can fill some more gaps and more needs for the club, if you can walk away with 3 midfielders or 2 midfielders and a defender, that could be a pretty good outcome potentially. Okay, next up on the list, we've got Jacob Farrow, who's moved down to 13. He's actually starting to get a little bit of traction lately, probably more so amongst supporters than anything else. I've even noticed there's been a few more views on my video of Jacob Farrow's highlights from a little while ago. I'm starting to wonder, does he maybe become a bit of a mini bolter? Not Noah Bolter, but a mini bolter of the draft, if that makes sense. Yeah, it's interesting. I just don't... People might be worried about the WA factor, but go and watch his highlights. He can seriously play. Josh Lindsay has dropped down to 14. And this is interesting because when Jesse and I were doing the mock draft the other night, there's a little bit of feedback or question about how low we had Josh Lindsay, but he seems to be falling down a few people's orders and mocks. And look, it's nothing to say he won't go higher. It's just interesting to see everyone else is kind of doing the same type of thing. So he will be an interesting one to see where he places on the night. Jovan Filippo's come up to 15. Ollie Greaves remains the same, but obviously didn't do the combine testing. It would have been really interesting to see how his combine results may have impacted his projected or his power ranking or mock draft area. So it's a shame we didn't get to see him out there. Mitch Marsh has dropped down to 17. Lockie Dobson remains the same at 18. Oscar Taylor and Hibbins Hargraves have swapped positions at 19 and 20. Hibbins Hargraves didn't do the combine testing, and Oscar Taylor, as we know, shot the lights out at the combine, which is obviously, played in his favour in terms of his rankings. But there you go. There is Cal Toomey's power rankings for October. I think he does release his mock draft maybe the week of the draft, but like I said, I feel like a lot of this is going to stay relatively the same. There might be a couple of, I suppose, small shifts based on club needs, but it seems like, I think Cal himself, has said that he feels like the top 10 is fairly well locked, which is interesting because a lot of his changes came from 10 down. So that sort of ties into what he said, and he tends to know a bit more than all the rest of us, which is why we always keep an eye out for it. But what will be fascinating is how all the bidding plays out too. There was a bit of speculation. I don't know who put it out there, whether it was West Coast or who it might have been, that they might bid on Harry Dean pretty early, which would be extremely interesting for a number of reasons. Being, will the Blues match it, or they just say, okay, you can have him? And by West Coast doing that, it sort of wipes out the points for Carlton straight away. And does that give them a better pick advantage somewhere else? Are they trying to force them to trade a pick to them? It's a pretty good mind game tactic, and it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. But hopefully, outside of the Harry Dean one, I do hope that West Coast and Richmond bid pretty aggressively early on to try and knock out all of these academy players points-wise for the Suns and the Lions. But yeah, the open draft is looking really interesting. Things are starting to take a bit more shape. But I suppose the question is for today, well, firstly, there was the splitting of pick question earlier, but if this was to play out as the actual draft and we walk away with Sullivan Roby and Xavier Taylor, how do you feel about that? Would you do anything different? Is there value in splitting pick 4 or 3 and maybe passing up on Roby to get 2 other players only a couple of spots further down in a much more even group? So many things to consider, so many ways this can play out. It's the beauty of the draft, the beauty of power rankings. Let us know anything in the comments below, and make sure you like and subscribe for more content. And until next time, go Tigers!